Guy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, excited to talk to you. We've met and hung out a little bit at two different podcast movements, one in Los Angeles and one in DC, which as of recording this was just about, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, coming up on a month ago. But yeah, man, wanted to pick your brain, wanted to talk to you about several things, which we'll get into. The first of which is, and I ask everybody this because it just sets the tone for like who you are and your vibe and all that. Where are you originally from?
Originally, I'm from Kentucky. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and grew up in a small town about 60 miles from there called Springfield, a tiny little town. I went to college in Louisville, and that's where I met my wife. And then shortly after that, moved to Cincinnati for a job, and now I live in Cleveland for a different job that my wife got about 2 years ago.
Cool, man. And I'm seeing those guitars in the background, and just knowing what I know about you, what age did you get into music? What inspired that, and what age did you start playing?
So I have always been into music. My parents were really into music. My dad played guitar and sang to me when I was a kid growing up, and I was forced to take piano lessons when I was a little kid, like 5 years old, started taking piano lessons. And I didn't really like it. It was a chore. All of my siblings had to do it. But around age 11 or 10, sometime around there, I was getting into like guitar-based music. I think it was actually, do you remember Firehouse? They were like a hair metal band in the late 80s, early 90s.
No, I don't.
It was like,
that doesn't ring a bell.
It was like Poison kind of thing, but not as popular. And but they had a hit song back when I was in sixth grade. And I was just like, you know what? I bet my dad could teach me how to play that song. It opened on an acoustic guitar. My dad had one. And as soon as I said that, my dad was just like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. So he went out and bought me a cheap guitar. And I just kind of fell in love with it immediately. I eventually gravitated towards the bass guitar. And so I kind of starting probably around age 12 or 13, started playing mostly bass. But I, started playing drums and guitar, and I can still kind of play the piano. I don't really read music very well, but I know enough to like figure it out. But I mostly just play by ear.
Dude, I have a similar story, kind of. I wasn't forced to take any lessons, but I did take some like early on. I think it was like fourth grade-ish is what I recall of like guitar. And it was like super boring. I kind of knew I wanted to play guitar, but like the lessons, it was like, yeah, they had me reading like Mary Had a Little Lamb and stuff like that. And then I kind of stopped, and then I started playing again. And the guy, I was a little older, and he was kind of teaching me like bluesy stuff. And I was like, all right, so this is kind of cool, but got a little more into it. But then when I really started playing was like, yeah, probably middle school, except instead of hair metal bands, for me, it was like Nirvana and Green Day. And that kind of sent me off into like, yeah, wanting to play like rock music and stuff.
Yeah, that sort of style is like, that's what I kind of, really kind of fell in love with it. The Guns N' Roses, that kind of stuff was what was available to me growing up in small town Kentucky.
That's dope. That's difficult too, if you were trying to play that at a young age. Wow.
Yeah. And then I found, when I found Nirvana, it was just sort of like, I guess they were really kind of who inspired me to start writing music, because it was at that age is when I started writing music around 13, because it was like, well, I was learning Nirvana songs to play with my friends. And I was like, I can write these. These are really simple, bar chords kind of thing. And so, kind of became my focus as early as 13 was writing music rather than just learning to play what other people did.
Hell yeah. I love that. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you learn a few power chords and a few bar chords, and you put like four of them together, and you're like, oh, this is kind of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Like those bands. And then I love that because that kind of just kickstarts around our age, every person's like rock story or music story. It's very similar, which I think is cool. Tell me, were you in bands? Were you like, did you tour? Did you play a lot of shows? Like, what was that like?
So I pretty much was always in bands from the age of 13, of varying levels of success, mostly no success. But at near the end of college, and it was all local band kind of stuff. Near the end of college, this was around 2003. I'd been in a few local bands that were getting a little bit of attention there locally, and a couple of bands that I was big fans of there in town asked me to join and play bass for them. And one of those was called Your Black Star was the name of the band, and we toured around quite a bit. We're very, very small. I don't even know if you can even find anything of theirs online anymore. And I never actually recorded anything with them. So there isn't any evidence of me being in the band out there. But I toured around a lot with them. That was a really fun experience, sort of getting a look into that side of the world. The last tour I did with them was for a band from Louisville called Elliott, who was on Revelation Records. And they were moderately successful. At the time, I thought they were huge. By today's standards, they're pretty small. But they broke up and went on one farewell tour, and they brought us along with them to open for them. So every night I was playing to 1,000 to 2,000 people, and there was a green room with food.
Hell yeah.
I got paid $5 a day. It was like, oh, man, I've made it. Like, this is it. But that's about as close as I've gotten to actual success as far as a band goes.
Dude, I love that. Getting to tour a little bit. I did a little bit of that, mostly like West Coast, Pacific Northwest, Arizona, San Diego. But the reason for the audience why we're asking this is because, as you scratch that, I'm going to pick up here. But the reason why, one, I'm a huge music fan. That's a big part of my life, especially when I was younger. Not as much now, but like the same enthusiasm, the whole like DIY thing, punk rock. And then I was actually really big into like emo and then like scream hardcore and all those kind of bands in like the early 2000s. But I just like hearing people's stories when it comes to music because it's inspiring, and I think it just tells a little bit of like who you are and what you're about. So fast forward to Hookergate. So for those of you that don't know, Guy is the co-creator, as well as other roles in the show, of a podcast called Hookergate, which ended up and still has a lot of success. But tell us the story of how that all started, and yeah, just like the wild ride that you've been on with that.
Yeah, it's hard to even know where to start. I've told this story a lot, though. So I have a really good friend. Her name's Lindsay Byron. She has an online persona called Lux ATL. Has a pretty big following online. Her and I have been really good friends for about 10 years. Our spouses are good friends. We go on trips together, all four of us and everything. And the two of us, we just like all the same art and music. And we've collaborated a lot musically. And a couple of years ago, I get this call from her, and she's like, dude, I've got this idea. I've got this story. And she proceeds to tell me about how a family member of hers brought her this box of old newspaper clippings. And they were from the 70s, and they were about this story from her hometown of Danville, Virginia, of this truck stop brothel ring. That's the hook that gets everybody. When I say truck stop brothel ring, they're like, tell me more.
Well, also, and sorry to interrupt, but did you say several years ago, like the impetus of this was?
Yes. Yeah. So this was in 2021 was when I first heard about it, when my friend first heard about it. It was basically a story totally lost to history. It was a huge scandal. The prosecuting attorney was shaking down the brothels for money and free girls. And eventually the feds came in, broke the whole thing up, and the local press dubbed it Hookergate because it was right after the Watergate scandal, in the 70s. And it sort of got lost to history. A bunch of people went to prison. And my friend, who grew up there, never heard about it, gets this box of old newspaper clippings dumped on her. And she's a writer. The reason why they gave it to her was because she's a writer, and they wanted her to do something creative with it. And she had done podcasts before. She had done books before. I actually designed her book that she wrote. And so right after she discovered this and was like, I've got to figure out something to do with this, iHeartRadio's announced the Next Great Podcast competition. It was actually the second one they did. They did one in 2020, I think, and then the second one in 2021. And she called me up. She's just like, this story, it's perfect for this. And we've just got to make this 60-second trailer to enter the competition. And she had a vision for it. Like, she already knew what kind of music she wanted, and this idea for what it would be like ultimately. And it sounded like exactly the kind of project I wanted to work on. And so over the course of about a week, we made a 60-second trailer for the podcast, and we made like a pitch deck, like a PDF pitch presentation that we submitted for this competition. And a couple months later, we get told we were one of 10 finalists to produce a pilot. And we got a little bit of money to produce a pilot, but we only had 2 weeks to do it. And because of our schedules, we really only had 1 week to do. And so we just worked our tails off for a week and put together this pilot episode and sent it in. And a couple of months later, we got an email that we won. And, that's kind of why I'm here today. So right after that, we then, got to work on the full first season, and which turned into an even bigger production than we were expecting it to be. So it took quite a long time to get it finished up, but we just released the first season this year, back in March.
Dude, so much to unpack there. First off, what I'm saying, and for the audience's sake, and why I set up the whole music thing is because, like, this idea for this trailer came about, but it's like, I feel like because of your background and being creative and like music and the whole DIY thing, it kind of coalesces into like creating something. And you and her, she got this idea, and you're like, yeah, we can create that, because you had been creating things your whole life, and you're also a graphic designer, which we'll get into. But it's interesting, right? How like people's past kind of sets them up for something that may be similar or a little different, but like their past experience kind of like sets them up for success for something else, or for other quote unquote like creative projects. Which I think is rad. And I think there is like a connection there if you follow like your story. But dude, so I didn't know it was the trailer, and then you won that. And then they're like, okay, go, you got to create a pilot. So like, what the hell is that like? And remind me, they gave you a little bit of money to create the pilot, or not yet?
Yes. Yeah. So we didn't get it up front. We got reimbursed. It took like 2 months to get it, but, part of the contest would be, I think it was 10, either 8 or 10 finalists, and we got $1,000 each to produce a 30-minute pilot.
And did you guys know anything about like how to budget or how to produce a podcast, or were you both just creatives and you're like, okay, we can take this kind of story, and knowing what we know about podcasting, or did you not really listen to too many crime podcasts or podcasts in general? Did you have like any, like, you know what I mean?
I
like,
didn't have much.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I didn't have much idea personally prior to all of this starting. So my friend Lindsay, she's a podcast junkie, and she's done podcasts in the past before. She did one called Stripcast. She, like, her kind of hook online is she's a stripper with a PhD. She went to worked in the clubs to work her way through school, and then when she graduated, found out she was going to make more money in the clubs than she was going to as a professor.
One of those.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a kind of really interesting story. She's a really interesting person, and incredibly smart and talented. But that's kind of what she built her persona around, was sort of the stripper with a PhD kind of thing. So she has this podcast where she talks about her experiences working in the clubs, and that was
so she had some experience actually podcasting herself, and then probably listening to podcasts. So you're like, okay, this is what a podcast is like. And then you can kind of, especially if you listen to other true crime, you can kind of like visualize like story arc. And you said she was a writer, so okay, so that all makes sense.
Yeah, and so she had an idea for what she wanted it to be like, because it's not a journalistic podcast, so to speak. We call it a docudrama. There's a little bit of retelling and narration of the story, but there's also like dramatic reenactments and voice actors and scenes that we recreate. And so she sent me some podcasts to like reference, like, this is kind of like the overall like concept of what I'm going for. these sorts of things. So I had like a crash course on it, but I didn't really know how to make a podcast. To what you say, it is kind of like, the only reason I was able to do it was because of the 20 years of learning music and music production. Prior to that, beyond just our,
Yeah. And, okay. So you get the pilot, and then what happens next? And tell me a little bit too about like the steps of creating something like this, like storyboarding or whatever it is.
So there were a couple of things. One big detail was we had an interview with her family member who gave her the newspaper clippings because we wanted to incorporate interviews. And that was the only one we knew we were going to be able to get like in 2 days. So we recorded an interview with her. And then Lindsay took all of her materials and the interviews and sort of wrote a script and read it all out. She lives in Atlanta. I was living in Cincinnati at the time, but we weren't never in the same room. So she just did everything, kind of on her own, wrote a script, recorded it, sent it to me. And then I started like piecing it together because she would have notes like sound effects here and do this here, transition here, and add in this clip from the interview here.
Oh,
so she had a lot of stuff. Yes. Yeah. It was very well thought out and outlined. I went in, started working on it. From there, I actually, was like, I think we should make these changes to improve it. So she actually ended up, I think, probably recording the whole episode 3 or 4 times. Like record it, send it to me. We put it together, review it, then, kind of do that back and forth. And this was all in the course of like a week. It was really kind of insane. And in that time, I'm writing music. I'm gathering sound effects and putting, those together, as well as just all of the editing part and trying to critique the actual, story at the same time. So it was really, really fast paced and really just kind of making it up as we went along.
And what kind of tools, since you guys were all remote, like what, I'm assuming Zooms, and then tell me a little bit about like, were you using Descript or what DAW do you like to work in for editing and recording and stuff?
A history of working together. But like, I kind of knew what to do. I wouldn't say that I did it the most efficient way, if I were going to do this, the next time I do it or for other people who did it, but I wasn't like, how do I even get started? Like I knew how to do it. It was just putting in the work and making it happen. I use Logic for my audio production. And just because I kind of always have, I started using it. I'm an Apple guy, so it was an easy transition to make. And it comes included with a lot of software instruments. So strings, piano, saxophone, whatever you could imagine, weird percussion instruments. It all comes included in software. So that's what I started using. I've been using it for a long time. I didn't know anything about Descript when we started this, so I just did everything in Logic. Like Lindsay would send me her WAV file. She has a recording setup once she's done previous podcasts, but I actually had this microphone that I have. She recorded the pilot with it because I left it with her when we recorded some songs together. We wrote some songs together and recorded those in Atlanta. But she would send me her WAV file, and it included all of her, mess ups and redos and notes to me verbally. And I just plopped it into Logic, listened to it, and started chopping it up and putting it into an actual finished piece. And then I stayed inside of Logic and wrote the music on top of it and put the sound effects on top of it. It was all just in one single session.
Wow. Yeah, so just taking that and putting it into Logic. I mean, that's honestly what I would do. I work in Pro Tools, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people use all these like collaborative. My wife is calling me. I don't know why. We'll keep that in. That's funny. Yeah, I use Pro Tools. I'm kind of old school like that too. Honestly, I would probably personally follow a similar workflow. But nowadays I have worked with a team once where we did it like in Descript, because then you can like leave notes and it all saves like on the cloud in real time, and you can like highlight stuff and however you like to work regardless. But I'm on page with you with how I would probably prefer. It's just kind of easier for me. But so let's talk about the music. So did she have a vibe in mind, or did you have a vibe in mind, or kind of like, how does that come about? Cause that could take so many different like shapes and styles. And with a show like this, like a well-produced, like quote unquote true crime type of show, like the sound design, the music, the sound effects, all of that, like is very important and kind of paints the picture. Like, so how did that come about?
Well, I got to give a lot of credit to Lindsay. She had a vision from the very beginning. The way she described it to me, the music that she envisioned was dark bluegrass, which sounded awesome to me. I don't listen to a lot of bluegrass, but I know a lot about it. But I like dark music. And when she said that, I already like could just hear it in my head, like even without like actual notes or anything. I knew exactly what she was saying and exactly what I was going to try to do. And so that was sort of the guiding light. And at first all it was just the theme music for the trailer, the 60 seconds to go behind the opening theme. And then when it came time to actually do the full episode, for the pilot, we didn't, I don't know if she gave me too much notes. I just kind of went along with what the vibe that she had told me. When it came for the actual full season, she had a vision where she wanted, she imagined like theme songs for different character groups, because we have stories that intertwine. So, there's the local journalist protagonist and the guys who work in the brothels. There's the girls, there's the police, the corrupt police. There's all these different people. So they all got their own musical theme that I would use to like introduce character sets. And then when they're brought back into the story in a later episode, bring their music back in to sort of clue the listener into what's going on and how the story is changing.
Dude, it's so interesting that you say that, because I worked with a guy one time and he was very similar to what you just said, like different. He was doing it not so much with music, but with different like sound elements. Sorry, I'm kind of sick. Different sound elements where like, yeah, if a certain character came in or a certain scene changed, there would be like these familiar sounds to like, so that you associated it with something. So that obviously, I guess, is like a technique,
It is, and I only, know that just casually because I'm, I really like reading about music and production of all sorts, so I'm kind of I know more about like Foley and like the production of movies than maybe your average person does, even though I've never actually made a movie before. That kind of stuff really fascinates me. And so I definitely understood that as a concept and was very intentional about doing that.
And were you doing, like you mentioned, like the software synths, like a lot of MIDI stuff? Or were you playing like bass and guitar on it as well?
So for the most part,
what really interests me too is, would you like listen to, explain how it went. Cause in my mind, I'm like, would I listen to kind of like the voiceover and the clips of like from interviews and stuff while I try to compose, or would I just write something and then kind of drop it into the show and it would just kind of make sense?
It was a bit of both. I think there might have been two parts to that question. I don't remember it all, but generally the music would start with just me on a guitar. For the most part, if you hear a guitar playing on the episode, I'm actually playing that guitar, hooked up, recorded with a microphone, which is actually really difficult to do when you're trying to be fast paced. But most of the other instruments are software instruments. So I'm playing them with a keyboard, or even, I don't know if you've ever like clicked in MIDI notes on a DAW.
Oh yeah. Draw them in. You can.
Yeah. So I do that quite a bit just because it's faster sometimes. So most of the instruments are digital, playing with a MIDI controller, but pretty much all the guitar, I actually played that. And so most of the songs started with me just holding with an acoustic guitar, coming up with ideas and licks. And then I would go in and listen to the narration after I had it edited down and play on top of it to sort of see how it fit. It's a very delicate balance of like having interesting music without getting in the way and pausing for words, knowing when to pause or when to, play. So I was very intentional about where everything fit in and the rhythm of everything with the narration. It wasn't just record the music, get it that good, and then plop it underneath it. It was very much done all together at once.
Yeah, very, very like methodical and very like in it rather than just, I'm going to write this song and then we'll just kind of edit it in. Like, yeah, you really thought about it and you kind of have to like feel it too, I would imagine, more so than just kind of, coming up with something that you could quickly like drop in.
There were a lot of, during the actual full-length episodes, a lot of them I would like literally play it as I'm listening to it and record it in real time and would just have to do it until I got it right because it was, I couldn't really do a tempo. It wasn't a solid tempo throughout the whole time. This section has to be slightly faster. And so I just have to practice it and do it several times to get the line in the right timing to fit with the words and the narration.
Yeah, that's got to be tricky because you're right. Yeah, you're not just like to a metronome. It's all just like feel, like all... Okay, cool, man. And so after pilot, how long did it take to complete the whole thing? Or did you have to complete it and like ship it to iHeart all at once? Or was there like a middle process?
We completed the entire season 1, and submitted that before we actually got on a schedule for release. So the time that took, it was January or February of 2022 when we found out that we won. And it was March of 2024 when it was released.
So 2 years.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay, that makes sense.
Right, like the day that we found out that we won, Lindsay found out that she was pregnant, which was, she's happy about, but it wasn't expected. It was kind of an unexpected, wrinkle in everything. And also, she started the process of researching, which was really intense. And she, in that process, found the federal court transcripts for the federal trial that went on, which was like 4,000 pages, that she had to go to Philadelphia, the National Archives, buy a flatbed scanner, and by hand scan 4,000 pages, and then read them to create this story. So it ended up being,
Dude,
it was...
That's crazy.
Yeah, and in fact, she did it 8 months pregnant with a mask on because it was in the middle of COVID. 8 hours a day and for like 3 days scanning these pages over and over and over again. So with all of that, just by itself, it's a massive undertaking. But all of that, just kind of added to how long it took. And then, once the episodes come to me. Once, she would be done, she would record and send an episode to me, and then I got to start all my work on it. And then after that is the revision process and everything. So altogether, we finished everything in November of 2023, and it wasn't able to get released until March just because there's a really long lead time on the schedules at iHeart. So you have to submit and be done, at least for, episodic stuff like that. Once it's done, you get on the schedule, and it's always like several months ahead that they've already have planned out. So
like to do their whole, to build up like a marketing push and stuff like that. Yeah. Dude, so when we first met at the Podcast Movement Evolutions in LA, it had just it went live, I guess. Cause I think I remember, and I could be misspeaking, but I want to say at that point not all the episodes were out because they didn't drop them all at once, right? Was it for a week until
Yes, we dropped one a week for each episode. And when we met, episode 2 had just come out. So it was brand new, really exciting. And so I was, still right at the beginning of it, it felt like.
And did at any point did you guys hire help? Because I see sometimes like on these true crime shows or any kind of like in-depth like a narrative show or something, sometimes there's like a staff at these big companies like of like 6 people. They'll be like senior producer, associate producer, editor. I've even seen like a job fact checker, researcher. Did you a little bit, or was it just the two of you?
It was just the two of us. I wish we could have, and in the future we've got big plans for other stories and other big projects, and it would be amazing to build a team to have that many people. Right now, it's just the two of us. We did absolutely everything, and I'm pretty proud of that because if you look at us, we're still, we haven't. The last episode of season 1 came out 2 or 3 months ago. And we're still, this morning I looked, we're still like number 130 on the true crime charts. We still get put on some list by Apple every now and then. So we're still kind of up there. And most of the podcasts on the charts there around us on the true crime charts are made by big teams like you're talking about,
Oh, yeah, dude. Like Amazon or Wondery and like they've invested.
Dateline is there, NPR is there, like really big production studios and even smaller studios, but big teams are kind of our peers on the charts. And it's just the two of us doing everything.
Dude, well, congratulations on that success. I mean, that's huge. It sounds like it was just a wild ride, just the impetus of it and the contest and you not really being that involved in podcasting at all. So did you because you said she had to scan those documents and I'm imagining, just like tons of research and how many interviews did you have to do and did you have to schedule them or is there not a lot of interviews? Kind of what was that like?
So, in the actual season, there's only 2 interviews. She did more than that. The biggest interview we have, the best one was, Rodney Smith, who was the journalist who kind of broke the story back in the day. She was able to find him and get an interview with him, and he's amazing. Was really great on the podcast. And then there was someone who was the son of one of the prosecutors, one of the law enforcement that wasn't involved in it all. One of the people who's actually prosecuting it, his son, was interviewed for it. And in the course of that interview, he actually admitted to going to the brothels when he was a teenager, which was kind of wild and unexpected. But as you can imagine, a lot of people that were affiliated with this didn't really want to talk to Lindsay when she came looking for interviews to do the full season. So she actually found a few of the women that were involved. And, they're all grandmothers now. Some of them have very nice lives. Some of them have very bad lives right now. And none of them wanted to talk to her. She did talk to a few, preliminarily, and most of them backed out. The one person who didn't back out was such a mess, really drunk the whole time and everything that it wasn't even worth using. Wow. So a few interviews, but that still is something we, wouldn't mind uncovering for, future season.
I'm wondering why they wouldn't want to interview. I mean, maybe that's a part of their life they don't want to talk about, but you would think so many years later, you've kind of put it behind you and, maybe season 2. Cause now I'm thinking, well, maybe, I don't know if they followed it or maybe they saw that the podcast came out. Maybe they're more educated now on what a podcast is. So yeah, maybe this time around they'd be like, oh, okay, I see kind of what, because it's kind of hard to explain to someone, one, if they're a little bit older, and 2, if they don't really know about podcasting, but maybe now, if they could listen to it, they'd be like, oh, I see what you guys are, the project. And maybe now they would be willing to talk. So it's interesting,
Yeah.
I feel like I'd be down to talk about something weird in my past. When I'm old, I feel like I wouldn't care. I'd be like, just put it all on the table. I had another question too, which I'm curious about, is did iHeart like, did they have any creative control? I'm just curious, like, how it works in that position, maybe for other people who maybe they get signed for a podcast, and like, are they like watching you, or is there like check-ins where you have to like submit whatever, like a rough cut of an episode, or is it kind of just take the ball and run?
We had complete creative freedom with everything. So we didn't get any notes. They didn't ask for any updates. We would send in updates as we were going along, just so they knew, everything was going along. But we submitted the episodes, and I asked about that, if there was a chance we'd get notes, and they basically said unless there was like audio quality problems, we weren't going to hear anything. And never heard anything, so I was happy about that part.
Was there lawyers involved on your end? I'm sure, obviously, on their end, but like, did they make you do like NDAs? Could you like announce that you won the contest before the show was like completed?
Yes. Well, we were able to announce. They announced that we won, and we announced that we won. Shortly after when we got the email, it was first like keep it quiet until we announce it, but that was only like a week. So it was public knowledge as far as that went. We did, we had a contract with iHeart, and
Sure.
had that reviewed by a lawyer and everything, but no real, NDAs or anything like that. I think it was all fairly standard stuff.
And as much as you want to talk about it, do you guys have ownership now, and you just like they're just doing the marketing and the advertising, or did they own it now? How does that work?
So we do share ownership now. It's actually three ways. The competition, this is kind of a weird part of it that I don't really mention much, but the head judge of the competition is Dan Patrick. I don't know if you know who he is, an old ESPN SportsCenter guy.
Yeah, ESPN.
Yeah, so the Dan Patrick Show, I guess, in podcast form is on iHeart, and so he was the head judge and the sponsor, I guess, of the competition. And so, like, he owns part of it now, too, as does iHeart, and, so it's kind of a collaborative thing. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know exactly how all of that works or whatever. It's not like it's ours, you can't do anything or whatever, but we can't just go out and make a bunch of stuff under the Hookergate name now, without their permission, and they can't do it without our permission either, so we're all working together.
Cool. And you've made money, or you're going to make money, but you made the initial deposit probably. And then, if you're not comfortable, it's okay. But last time you told me, you're still waiting on the advertising revenue to come in. And so that's exciting, right? You've got to be expecting a check.
Yes. So I'm still waiting on that. I'm not sure what the reality is going to be, because they did do a really big marketing campaign, and I'm still waiting. I've heard stories about this, like with, major like record labels and stuff like that. The reporting for that stuff is infamously very, very slow. And I'm getting a feeling maybe it's like that here. Right now, we haven't actually gotten our first quarterly statement. I'm told it should be around sometime, so I don't really know what the details are going to be like that, what the actual expenses are. I'm curious to find out. We did get an advance, like at the start of everything, so we've gotten paid some, but right now I'm still a little bit in the dark and just kind of waiting for the details.
And do you guys have plans to? Well, you did mention you have plan, or at least ideas that you and her would maybe collaborate on. Is there anything you could talk about or want to talk about Hookergate wise in the future, or like other shows? I mean, is there any teasers you got for us?
Well, I can tell you we are working on season 2. We've got a plan for that, and so we're excited to get that going. It's all very early stages right now. But we're excited to get that going. We do have more stories, Lindsay and I. Some of them not really ready to talk about right now. Mostly I'm just
Sure.
don't have the pitch in my head. But I probably should have prepared something like that, so I could have told you. But we do have other stories that we're working on.
What's cool is that, like, if you do like, whether it's Hookergate Part 2 or like another kind of big story. You kind of now know, like, production wise, like what worked, what you should have changed, and like, you know, it'll still take a long time, but like at least you kind of know, like, oh, it'll be faster and easier if we do that. You learned a lot. Oh, you probably learned so much.
Yes, honestly, like there's so much so much I wish I'd done differently, and so much I'm excited to do differently, you know, in the future. So I did learn a lot, and honestly, I think most people learn best through experience. You just got to get in and do it. Most people's experience is in obscurity, and you know, mine got kind of released to a whole lot of people, so a little higher pressure. But I'm really excited to do more stuff. Also, what's really great is just having the relationship, you know, with iHeart now. Like for the new ideas, you know, nothing's guaranteed.
Sure.
You know, but we know people there.
You.
Yeah, they know us. And so
you got those email addresses, and you never know. You pitch them something, or at least stay cool with each other. And that's how that kind of industry works, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been an amazing opportunity, and you know, still going, you know, continuing to be an amazing opportunity. So.
And do you have any interest of getting on the mic yourself, or do you prefer to be like behind the scenes?
I prefer to be behind the scenes. I've thought a lot about doing, you know, my own podcast, just because I have that DIY punk rock ethic of doing everything by myself. I mean, that's kind of why I have this home studio. I just kind of gravitated towards making music by myself rather than in a band. So I like the idea of it. I don't really have the actual idea to try it with. And if I'm being honest, I like being in the shadows more than being up front. I don't crave fame or popularity.
Sure.
I don't do much on social media, and I always feel like I should do more to promote myself, but I'm not an attention seeker, I guess. So if I could just have it the way I want it, I would just be in my studio all the time writing music, and no one would know who I am, or except for sending me the money for the music I'm writing, you know. But
yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, you know, the social media thing, I was literally just thinking this morning. It's funny that you bring that up, because I do post stuff, and I scroll, you know, I lurk on like other people's stuff, but I'm kind of at the point where like I hate it, but I'm addicted to it like everybody else. And so the more I think about it, it's like, it can't be good for us, like as a society. Fortunately, I didn't grow up with it. You didn't grow up with it. So that's good, I think, because I think the generation that is right now will yet to see like what the like dangers are and how it messes with their brain. It already messes with, I'm 39, it messes with my brain, and I've got two very young kids. But yeah, the social media thing it's a blessing and a curse. And, you know, I'm sure I'll cut a couple clips up for this and put it on social media, but it's, I don't know. So it's interesting to hear from someone who's not, because a lot of people in this world, whether they're podcasting or whatever, are, you know, you kind of feel like you have to, if you have like a business owner or you're like a freelancer that wants to like grow, you know, that's like kind of the catch-22.
Yeah. It's a little intimidating too. Like all the people I've met at Podcast Movement, a lot of them are really, you know, serious content creators, and are, you know, posting every day, and multiple times a day sometimes. And it's I like really admire the hard work they put into it, but I haven't really gotten to that point.
It's not for you. Yeah, dude, there are a lot of hardcore content creators, and it's not easy to like do it and actually like try to grow. What's interesting about podcasting is, you know, social media, yeah, you post about your podcast, but I don't think social media necessarily grows your podcast, because then it's like people see a clip, maybe they do really like it, probably they don't, because they're just interested in scrolling past 100 things and getting that quick hit of dopamine. But for them to like see a clip, be like, oh, this guy's got a podcast, let me close this app, open another app, type in the name of the show, then follow this. There's a lot of steps you have to take. So fortunately, I think as you get further into podcasting, social media is kind of a secondary. It's not like the main source of like marketing and growth. So that's good.
Well, that was, if we can go back to talking about working with iHeart, that was really the best thing was the marketing that they did because, everything I've done, for the most part, most of my creative projects that weren't professional projects, but like, nobody listened to them. My music, like it was really obscure kind of stuff. And if anybody was going to listen to it, is because I was begging my friends on Facebook to listen to it or trying to promote myself. Go back to when I was 19, it's putting flyers up on telephone poles, whatever, like constant promotion, self-promotion. And I didn't do any of that for this. So like I never asked anyone to go listen on social media. I posted about it a couple of times, some of our the positive things that happened, but I never said, please go subscribe and listen and download, which making those sorts of posts like makes me ill. Like I just can't stand it. And maybe that's a flaw I need to get over, but it just like, I just can't, I hate doing that kind of thing. And I didn't need to, because even if I did that, I was going to get, maybe a dozen listens, but, they were literally playing our trailer on the radio, and all over, podcast, millions and millions of impressions. And that and getting on New and Noteworthy on Apple Podcasts, that's kind of huge. Where we got all of our audience from.
Yeah, having that machine, that iHeart machine behind it must have been so cool and so like freeing, because you're like, I can do what I do best with like the creation and the sound design and the editing, and let the marketers do the marketing. And so I think that's rad. Do you know how many downloads it's gotten? Any like ballpark?
I not completely. So I have an Omni account that they sent me, where I can see some of the downloads, but there's some information that's missing. So I'm like, Apple asked us to be part of a True Crime Plus subscription service where like the episodes would air a week early and ad free. And I don't have any numbers for that. So I don't have any idea, what that's for. And I think there's a couple other sources that don't get plugged into the reporting that I have. So I don't actually know. I don't really like talking
millions. It's got to be millions.
It's not quite there.
Okay.
But I will say,
you don't want to talk. It's all good.
I don't like talking specifics, but I will say, like I'm thrilled with the numbers that we got. It's the most people that's ever listened to my music or my creative work by far. But true crime podcasts, the ceiling is really, really high.
Yeah.
And so it feels a little intimidating because we haven't reached that ceiling. The top true crime podcast are the top podcast in the world when they top the charts. And I think on the top 200, I think we got to like 128 or something. It's the highest we ever got. I'm not sure if we ever cracked the top 100. And that's overall, not just true crime.
Not just true crime, all genres.
So like, I don't know. I've got screenshots somewhere. I'm not sure exactly how high we got on the overall charts. But, one day I was looking at, I was like, we're above Dateline, we're above Glenn Beck, we're above, Dana Carvey. Like, this is kind of wild. What's going on here?
Dude, I never thought about it the way you said it, which you just mentioned. That's the most people that have ever listened to my music. That's an interesting way to look at it, that, it's the podcast as a whole. But since you did the music, it's like, these people actually heard, in addition to hearing the podcast, they heard my music, which is kind of a cool way to look at that. I would have never thought about that. No, that's kind of what's been the coolest thing for me about it. I mean,
this it feels a little like cheating, but the promos they played, I made those. It had my music, and I edited, created those promos, and they played those on the radio. So
Very cool.
My music has played on the radio. Like it's
a dream, really, to be honest. Especially as like a young kid. I mean, now it probably doesn't feel as cool, but it's still fucking awesome.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't playing my music for entertainment. Like they paid to put that on there, but like, it's really, really cool. So I'm thrilled.
Yeah, dude. Like, think about your younger self. I mean, podcasts didn't exist, or maybe they did, but like as a teenager, if you're like, when you're at this age, this year, this winning this and doing the music is going to happen to you. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, really, man. Like, it's a pretty cool thing. Great story, like great show. You know, I mean, that's pretty impressive, dude. And it's just, you know, I know you don't like talking about it, but like pretty rad. So congrats again.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's, I'm really thrilled about it. You know, I don't know how many thousands of people submitted them initially, but it was in the thousands. And so when you apply to something like that, you don't really expect to win. Although when we started, for some reason, I was just like, man, we're going to win this thing. Like, I just kind of knew, it just felt like it was such a good idea.
Really?
That
I
I
felt that.
I really did kind of feel that, which isn't normal for me. But it was still like kind of a shock when it all happened. And we found out.
But isn't that interesting? Like, you kind of felt it, like some kind of energy in the universe or something. And you're like, oh, like you're like, I can do this. We're going to do this. That's crazy, man. That's cool. That's some weird energy in the universe or God or whatever people want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's wrap this up. Tell me what you're excited about and what you're working on. You briefly mentioned it, but maybe if you could just recap that for the audience and where people could find you if they want to get in touch.
So right now I'm just still continuing work on season 2 of Hookergate. I've got a lot of projects in the works right now. Unfortunately, not a lot to announce, but the easiest way to find me is my website, guykelly.com, just GUYKELLY.com. That's got, you know, links to various things there. I don't do a lot on Instagram, but, you know, you can find me on there. There's a link on my website to that as well, where I post some of my personal stuff occasionally. That's about it.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and we will chat soon.
Thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.